So before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather. I honour the deep and unbroken connection that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples hold to land, waters, skies and culture. On my way today to the podcast studio, I walked through Parliament lawns and there's a beautiful statue there and I stopped and looked at it. And it pays tribute to the legacy of two people I'd not heard of, Sir Douglas and Lady Gladys Nichols, community activists. May their work and memory continue to guide us walking respectfully and bravely towards a more just future.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're here.
We made it. I still can't believe we made it.
It's a pretty long run-up.
Pretty long run-up. And she's not in camera, but Taylor, our executive producer, is just off to my right. Do we think this would have happened without her?
No, we know it wouldn't have.
How long have we been trying to pull this podcast together?
Years. So why has it taken us so long, do you think?
Well, we did 40 episodes internally together. We have been running a podcast.
That's true. Little practice run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you seen that meme getting around? That's like
which meme?
That's like.
Have you seen that meme?
It's like a dog, and it says, do you think that people just make more meetings at work because no one listens to them at home and they don't know how to start a podcast?
No,
have you seen that one?
I haven't seen it.
So do you think because we don't work together anymore and I can't just put meetings in people's diaries anymore, that's why we're starting a podcast?
Maybe.
So I was flying here from Tassie. I'm down in Tassie, coming up to Melbourne. I bumped into a friend at the airport and I said, we were doing this podcast, finally getting off the ground. And he's like, oh, podcast. Low barrier to entry those, aren't they?
And then he just walk off? Because that would have been great.
Well, then my brain went to what one of my clinical supervisors said, which is if it gets off the ground, if you publish it, if you and Raj make it happen, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Oh. So who do we want listening to our podcast?
Well, both of those people. But I think anyone, what is this about, right? This is about the conversations and the realities and the kind of learnings that we've shared over the years that we've worked together on building high-performing teams and workplaces and what that takes and the good, the bad, the ugly, the stuff that works, the stuff that doesn't work, and the realities of, doing this in corporate Australia. I think, there's so much theory that's available, like heaps of great stuff. And we'll talk a lot about that on this podcast. But then when applying that theory, sometimes there's a bit of a lack of that insight, those learnings. And I think, people want to hear that. So who do we want to tune in? I guess anyone interested in great workplaces, great teams, building great people, and what that takes. Yeah.
So what's this? What's our history? What's our story? What brings you and me together?
Well, we first started working together 6 years ago,
About
6 years ago. Yeah, maybe. And I was, running alongside a few others, running a marketing and technology consulting business. And we bought into the idea of psych safety being at the core of great teams, but I think fundamentally the idea of kind of high performance within an organization. And look, as a services business, right, our greatest asset are our people. Effectively, we trade on the value of their knowledge and their abilities. And so what else would we invest in except at them? And so that thinking kind of led us to a consulting company that you were working at the time that kind of focused on leadership and org development and values and culture. And that's where our working relationship started. And then eventually I wooed you and got you over to the business to come and do that full time for us.
Yeah. So your business, the business I joined, is still, I think, really unique in that you had a really clear vision about we want to embed this stuff so deep into the business that it's not a bolt-on. It's not something that you can just kind of slides away if too many people leave or too many new people start. So as the business grows, it kind of grows with it. I still don't really see that in many other places.
Why do you think that is? You consult to lots of organizations, small, big. What do you think's missing? Is it like a lack of belief, or is it the ability to set great vision and great strategy? And
I think this stuff is just really hard. Stuff is genuinely hard. And when we were talking about what do we want to really cover in this podcast, there's kind of these two really clear threads, these two tensions or tugs of war. And one of them is theory and the research and the literature and what, what happens in a controlled environment. And this is what you should do out in the real world. And then the other end of that tug of war is the real world and the corporate realities of, stuff's messy and humans are complex and business is unpredictable, et cetera. So you've got that kind of tension. So you can have these really well-informed scientists making recommendations about what we should do to build high-performing teams. But then when it smacks into the real world, it's just not realistic.
I think we and personally had the fortune of building it from scratch.
Yep.
And so we weren't like hindered by, legacy and other organizational challenges that everyone has. And so it's a unique position. Not everyone gets that opportunity. I get it. But, everyone looks at like the Netflixes or the Amazons or the LinkedIns or the Facebooks or the, name insert technology company here.
Yep.
And they're all they pride themselves on innovation, and innovation is delivered through the ability to test, to learn, to experiment, which then is kind of founded in the idea of psych safety. So there's to your point, right? The theory is the theory and it's pretty solid, and I think everyone kind of accepts it.
Yeah.
But then how do you put it into practice? That's the tough bit.
Well, because it also creates a bit of there's like a divide, even just the language of what, psychologists or org dev people or even HR specialists will use. It's like models and constructs and frameworks and tools and instruments, et cetera. And then the language of business is, revenue, retention.
Yeah.
What kind of makes sense in terms of the strategy actually being enabled. So there's also it's that ability to bring the two together, I think, is the real kind of sweet spot, being able to bring together that science and theory and how to actually do it in the real world. So I think that's what you and I have done over very many years. I've given a language around some of the stuff that you've intuitively known. I think we need to do this or try this. And then you've kind of constantly grounded me back to, but how does this make commercial sense as well? So I think that's the other kind of really strong tension that we'll talk about a lot in the podcast is you've got ROI, what makes commercial sense, what's going to bring our strategy to life. And then you've got what, we've heard on multiple occasions described as fluff, the feel good, the fuzzy stuff. They're almost seen as a trade-off as opposed to actually they're completely interdependent on one another and they completely rely on each other and one's a lever for the other one. But it's almost like there's a mindset of they're separate. If you want to make a lot of money, you kind of got to, just get the workers to do the work.
Yeah.
Kind of
so
vibe.
When you get a call and someone says, hey, I need you to come in, run an offsite or do some work, what's the driving need? What are they looking to change?
Great question, because often they've got what they think they need. Oh, we need some leadership training or we need to improve our culture or we need to do – they're often focused on an outcome or an output. We need to make an offsite happen as opposed to and this is what I think you've always done well in your work and what I've tried to do in my work is kind of going right back through to actually what is actually going on here. You often say, but what problem are we trying to solve? What's actually the heart of this? So actually in my space, in my world, a lot of people come with this is the outcome I'm looking for, the thing I want you to produce for us, Mel, without going, back a few steps.
This is the why.
Yeah, why are we doing it? And are we actually trying to solve the right thing here or is there some much bigger kind of system thing that we need to solve first?
So for people that hopefully will tune in and listen to this, right, how do you define high performance? How do you define that phrase? What is it? What does that mean?
I did preparation for the first time ever for a conversation
I can see some notes.
For you and I. There's actual notes here. And I've prepared for you a history of high-performing teams. Do you want to hear it in 3 minutes?
Please.
I don't think I've ever
To a melody? How are you going to do this?
Look, I'm hoping we can get some music in the back later to this. Although I was going to ask you, as we sit in this kind of environment, have you ever found yourself on the other side of, a mic or some kind of electronic device before in your career?
Yes. Yeah. I've been known to dabble in the odd DJing life in my past.
Because you look very comfortable in this kind of environment. I just
what can I say? Once a professional, always a professional.
What do they
Give
call?
Give us the history.
Okay. So High-performing teams, and the language is quite specific. It's not high-performance teams. We talked about this a lot. High-performance teams is this idea that there's like an endpoint, and you do a high performance and then you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas high-performing teams speaks to the fact that it's ongoing, it doesn't end, continuous improvement, etc.
There's most people that are probably listening to this have read Simon Sinek's stuff.
Yep.
And the kind of the infinite game and infinite mindset kind of talks to that a lot, right? The idea that often sport is used as a parallel for business.
Yes.
Which is cool. I love sport, right? It's exciting and kind of you can kind of draw parallels between teams and structures and goals and winning. But sport ends.
Yep.
And business doesn't.
Yeah.
And so there is no like, oh, the season's over, we won a championship and we can chill out for a few months. It's constant.
Keeps going.
So
do you play sport?
What, like now, right now?
Yeah.
Not really at the moment.
Do you call yourself an athlete?
Yeah, I mean others would. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this will all probably sound very familiar to you then as an athlete. So the origins of high-performing teams comes from like military, like aerospace, aviation kind of stuff, sport, where often in these industries where failure is kind of like not an option, either because of safety or, you know, within sport, that's the kind of end goal. And then the business world liked what they were seeing and came in and started to adopt some of these frameworks and ideas and models in kind of the 80s and the 90s. So this is also when we're seeing more kind of increased competition and like pressure to increase productivity. So you've got your kind of Toyotas and your GEs and your, you know, Silicon Valley a bit later. And enter the chat in the 2000s is our mate. She's not our mate, but I'm going to call her our mate. I'd love it if she became our mate one day. Amy Edmondson, psychological safety. So
we should invite her.
We should invite her. Hopefully imagine if she was our first guest, hey. So 1990s, a new kid on the block comes in, psychological safety, this idea of actually attending to the emotional climate of your organisation and your teams and attending to things like being able to speak up and say what you really think and talk about mistakes, etc., is not a nice to have. It's kind of an imperative for high performance. So psych safety kind of came in and genuinely changed the game. So then people in business start talking more about role clarity, high performance, trust, accountability, and all of these things are kind of rebranded as like soft, fluffy, nice to haves, as like these are performance levers. And people start to get really excited about what this can really mean. So we're now, I think, in this interesting zone where, you know, we're really focusing on high performance and high humanity and really appreciating like what a high functioning organisation really looks like. So we're looking at, you know, and we've tackled a lot of this stuff together in our work and me and my consulting. It's like systems thinking, behavioural science, human-centred leadership, designing the environment so that high performance can happen.
Do you think that there's a danger of the pendulum having swung or can swing too far? So back to the start of our conversation around commercial realities in a business versus, you know, what's best and right for people. Sometimes those things can be in conflict. And so in the work that you've done or conversations you have with other businesses and leaders, how do you determine how far you should go one way or another?
So I've actually got another list. I know, this is crazy. This is unheard of. Let me flip that over to you. Have you ever had to try and convince a board, a client, an organisation of the value of some of the stuff that we've done together?
Yeah.
And how did you do it?
It's a good question. I think even when we first made the investment, I mean, you know, we were a startup, right? And so the idea of investing into organizational development in the first couple of years of building a business is unusual. Doing it in a consulting business is, I think, unheard of. Like, I'm not sure. I haven't come across another business, let alone a services-based business like ours that took that path. As you know, as hard and as kind of like focused as we did. So yeah, early on, I mean, I think the conversations, especially in our board, were very, very of the nature of, look, my job is to lead this business. And I think this is going to have a marked improvement in terms of how we perform, how we come together, how we build teams. Scaling rapidly, I think for anyone building a business, but also anyone building new teams.
So when you said to them, I think this is going to help, what data were you using? What metrics? What information? Was it hard data? Was it gut feel?
I mean, right? It's not as if there's a tremendous amount of reports you can point to which go, this approach leads to this EBIT result. And there's a mountain of data that suggests that. Or at least I didn't have access to it. So it was primarily based on, I can see this challenge, which is we're growing at like 200% year on year, which means we're bringing in new people. And we're effectively asking these people who have never met to come together and gel quickly and then show up to customers and act as a unified team.
Yeah.
And that's impossible.
Yeah.
Because there's difference of opinions, different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences. And this happens time and time again. Everything's fine when everything's fine. But when shit hits a fan, that's when things start to fall apart.
Yep.
And for us, because we were growing so quickly, I could just see this will be a challenge when times get tough.
Yeah.
When we're under the pump, there's a deadline to meet, whatever it means, right? And so how do we combat that? How do we do something about that before it happens? So the justification on the investment was largely around if we're going to build successfully and grow successfully, this could be a really unique way for us to do that. And that started with simple things like what's our vision, our values, our purpose, how do we come around a common idea? And then when people start to see it, I think that's the groundswell, right? Yep. When you see how people react to the initiatives and being part of designing the workplace that they want to be in, it's such a motivating factor.
Yep.
So, yeah, for us, it wasn't at the time, it wasn't hard data. But again, I had a very unique position, right? It was my call.
Yeah.
It was no one else's call.
Yeah.
So, I'm always interested in, where you've seen perhaps other people come up with a reason to do it when actually it's not their business. Yeah.
So this is where I think there's that tug of war between like what feels good, what feels right, what seems intuitively, to make sense, and where's the like return on investment of whatever we're putting in. And I've described this as return on investment versus fluff, right? To use a word that I really hate, but you hear it a lot, right? You hear it a lot from people who are like, yeah, but show us the value of this stuff that you do. So people's stuff like engagement, well-being, being able to feel safe enough to speak up, challenge the status quo, all of this kind of stuff, it's typically harder to measure. It's longer term, like it takes a longer time to build. It's complex and it changes. So you add one more team member in and the chairs all move around a little bit, so it's quite unpredictable. Caring and feeling good and doing stuff that feels good isn't often seen as like strategic.
Yeah.
It's just seen as like, oh, well, that's cute and that's something to do,
Totally.
If there's time around the real work. It often shows up like downstream, and instead of being able to kind of like precisely measure it, you have to use language like the weight of evidence suggests. Like when I pull these different initiatives together and look at, this engagement stat or this retention figure or whatever, the evidence suggests that perhaps these three things that we did in the last quarter, are paying off, but it's all kind of downstream. It can feel really slow, and it's organisations are fundamentally complex systems.
I think that like if there was an organisational change or a strategic shift for an org, it's something that they'd work on for years.
Yep.
Right, like a 3 to 5 year strategy. This is our corporate plan. I walk into rooms all the time. Here's our 2030 plan. Here's our 2040 plan, whatever it might be. And the idea that the people strategy doesn't need the same long-term vision is ludicrous.
Yep.
Like if you're expecting like a return next week to fundamental behavioral change in the organization, don't even bother.
So here's the tension, right? Here's the tug of war. Because on the other side that I've called profit or return on investment or how does this impact our bottom line, what boards are looking for, what executives are looking for, stuff that's visible, it's clear, it's, it's often is short-term, you can measure it, it's tangible, it can appear in a dashboard somewhere. You can stick it in your annual report and it's quite measurable and it's often quite numerical, it's quantitative. And that, often there's a desire for kind of clear, linear cause and effect. But that just doesn't exist with people. But then you've got the people that are often doing these roles, the people like me, are not always hard scientists. They're not mathematicians. And those folks don't easily fit in the business world either. That problem we talked about before of like they're not translating the language into a way that actually makes sense. So the people that are arguably best placed to kind of satisfy what the board's looking for are not in these rooms. And the people that are able to influence and like persuade and all of that, they often don't have really good hard data. Often it's just like these imprecise, it's gut feel stuff. Like, I just feel like these initiatives are right. I just feel like this is the good thing to do. And, the weight of evidence, we see the engagement scores have gone up. So we don't know, but we think maybe it's because of these, changes, but it's not measurable. So I had this debate with in a workshop last week where one of the other facilitators was like, Mel, you've got to pull your finger out. You have to start being able to measure this stuff. You have to be able to prove the efficacy of what you're doing. How did we do it? How do people do it?
Well, but I think so. Hindsight's a lovely thing. But if I look back now and I went, well, how do we prove it? How do we prove it?
Yeah.
How have we proved it? Well, we proved it with growth. We proved it with retention. We proved it with revenue uplift and profit.
But how do you know? Like, what percentage of the how do you know?
But that's what business leaders are there to do, right? Make strategic decisions. And it's the same as if I said, hey, we're going to buy 5 new locations. Historical data says that's how we'll make some money, and that's the bet we're going to make. But someone has to make that decision. Someone has to say we're on here.
I think this is the core of it. Name me a single CEO who's got an HR, chief people officer background, psych background.
Well, maybe we should find one.
Yeah.
Surely they exist. Well, we've had this conversation, right? Like there's not many on paper anyway, and we should dive into this, but modern CEOs with that kind of people, culture, HR background.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is also this idea that the people side of things is not commercially driven, but it is. Like if we have happy people, engaged people, we should also talk about the fact that this is not just, letting people or giving people tools and assets to enjoy work. It's actually also changing the structure of how work gets done. So, the organizational structure and clarity on roles and responsibilities, clear accountability on who does what, who can, say yes, who can have that approval. How do you remove, gates from the pathway of getting stuff done? Part of high performance is also being like really, really clear on, who plays which part, right?
Yeah. You and I have spoken at length about a very well-known guy from many, many, many moons ago, Patrick Lencioni, and he has got a great model around what causes dysfunctional teams.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's good, and it's one of these kind of oldie but goodie kind of ones where we haven't really seen. There's so many models and frameworks out there, and they can be used in lots of different ways, but that I always come back to the ones that are kind of really solid and keep proving their worth even as the world of work changes. And he talks about a range of different kind of skills that you need in these high-performing teams, and they're the things that come up over and over again. So things like trust, which is so closely tied to psychological safety, being able to do what I call like fighting well, robust, healthy conversation, not that territory that's just kind of asshole behaviour dressed up as like, I was just being honest, like it's actually just jerk behaviour. So how to have those really robust, genuinely honest but still caring conversations to be able to challenge each other's ideas, things around that accountability, making sure that you do know who's meant to be doing what and that there are kind of systems around that so that it's measured so that people do kind of have North stars that they keep coming back to, and then focus on results. Like you can do amazing work, and we've had this conversation before. Sometimes I've delivered stuff in our previous business that was really good but wasn't really aligned to the strategy. So is it really that high value? So just making sure that everything that people are doing are really focused on the end result, the ultimate goal. I've forgotten the fifth one. I've got 4 of them. Trust, fighting well, accountability, attention to results. I think the 5th one is around like clarity, who is doing what, so people aren't stepping on each other's toes all the time. So if we think about that as like a nice summary of what is a high-performing team, of those 5 things, role clarity, accountability, focus on results, etc., what do you think is the hardest one to kind of like land within a business?
I'll often see leaders and organizations talk about psych safety, and they'll talk about it and they'll do things around opening up conversations and trying to lean in, bring your whole self to work, all that sort of stuff. But where it falls is in the work. So in the work, when people are doing their day job, the lack of clarity on roles, the lack of structures, the lack of processes, the lack of autonomy, the lack of what am I doing and how's that tied to the end result that the business actually cares about?
Yep.
That's where this falls over for me. So for me, I think early on, what I was able to connect with was, this isn't just about the elements of like trust and safety. They're foundational. You've got to be able to open up those conversations and really lean into that. But there's a reason why it's at the foundation.
Yeah.
And then everything else is what you start building upon. And I think a lot of people will stop, and not like they'll stop on purpose, but that's the hardest thing to change. The hardest thing to change is how you work.
Yep.
You can easily go to an offsite. You can do them every week, right? Open up all the conversations and it's great. But it's in the work where the magic really happens, and where people are in the trenches and they're getting shit done. How much effort are you putting in on changing those processes?
Yeah.
Right.
So what you've summarised, I think, is at the heart of organisational development as a skill, as a craft, and I reckon it is a really poorly articulated, understood thing. It gets confused with organisational change, with 100%. HR, just even effective. People just don't even know what it is, right? So when I think about what is organisational development and why should a business have it, why should it be at like very, central to the business and have leaders at the highest level who do this kind of work, it's because it is about the whole system. It is about the ways of working. It's about the structures and everything. It's like the bones of the business. It's like the infrastructure. What infrastructure do we need to do with people, systems, processes, etc., that is a strategic enabler?
Yeah.
Here's our strategy, our corporate plan, whatever it is. If we work backwards, what are all the systems, behaviours, ways of working, how we talk to each other? What are all of those infrastructure things that we need to be able to meet the strategy? Then HR comes in and looks at the whole employee life cycle and is looking, is really contributing towards hiring the right people, keeping the right people, all of those kind of more individual level things.
Which is why we go back to like the results. It needs to be measured long term. And it needs to be measured across multiple facets, right? Like engagement, retention, fine, but that's the starting point. Like you've got to look at innovation.
Yep.
So one of the things that we looked at as we matured was how many new things are we doing? Like experiments or new products or new services? What are we innovating? Because, ultimately we're trying to get people to lead and be great leaders. And part of that, and I, throughout a bunch of tech company comparisons earlier, it's to innovate, it's to experiment and come up with new ideas. So are we opening up that opportunity or not? And do people feel safe enough to do it? Revenue, profitability, right? Bottom line metrics are really critical too. You can't deliver poor business but have great culture.
Yep.
Those two things have to be connected. Otherwise, something's off, right? You're pointing the investment in people and culture and org dev in an incorrect way. Like this is still a business.
Yep.
It's still there to make money.
Yep.
It's for profit in most scenarios.
Yep.
It's for profit.
Yeah.
So, shying away from that idea I think is also dangerous.
Yeah.
Like pretending like that's not why you're doing this. Like people aren't stupid.
Yeah.
And so this is for us to create a great workplace in order to create a great business, which allows us to make a profit and then reinvest and grow.
Yep.
And so if you can't draw that line, or you're pretending like it's not that line, you got to step back.
Well, we see that with businesses that feel good to work there. It's comfortable and it's collegial, but they tend to not always make great strides in terms of innovation, trying new things, failing, break it, fix it, optimize later, etc. And those businesses can feel amazing to work in, but if it's not making money, the business will cease to exist.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And that beautiful job flits off, into the sunset.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one thing that you would want other CEOs, really senior business leaders to know about high-performing teams, if it's like brand new for them, if it's like new language, new concept, they don't even know where to start.
To me, the role and concept of organizational development is critical to understand. I think and maybe it's because of how the literature has kind of come.
Listen to you
over
literature.
Years. Yeah, big words. Huh? Who's the doctor now? It doesn't tie to the changes in the organization when it comes to like process and structures and work.
Yeah.
Tightly enough. And so the concept of org dev is, all those things, right? It's looking at all those things. It's looking at the system.
Yep.
And I think just that understanding and grounding yourself in you only get so far unless you look at the system.
Yes.
And we had these debates, right? You were very passionate about kind of fixing elements of like our onboarding processes or offboarding processes. And I was like, what for?
Yeah.
And, you were very clear that no, these 1%ers all add up.
Yep.
And when there's too many of them, it's probably the reason people will
start to go. Yeah.
Or worse, stay and just be disengaged.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this has been a really nice tension point for us over many years, this idea of like high-level thinking, big picture, focus on the big rocks, as opposed to like get stuck in the details, get stuck in the 1%ers.
Yep.
And I've always had this Shelley, I'm sure she won't mind her shouting us shouting her out. She and I used to talk about this a lot, this idea of so she's a psychologist as well, org psych. This used to work in our team, this idea of emu lining. Have you heard of an emu line before?
No.
Have
you heard of the Great Emu War?
No.
You start with the
let's do emu line and then let's do emu walk.
Then we'll say that for the next episode.
I need to Google if this is actually a thing. I think it's a thing. I don't think this is something I've made up, but
I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, Google can be the judge of that. An emu line is when like there's been a murder in the woods and the SES all get dressed up in their high vis and a long line of like 50 people walk through the bush.
That's called an emu line?
I think so.
Okay.
So they inch forward bit by bit to look for clues.
No, but why is it called an emu line?
I don't know. And it might not even be called, I could have made this, this could entirely be fabricated in my
fact check that one. Anyway, carry on.
So the idea is that you're constantly moving a whole bunch of things forward all at once. So that's what I would do when I joined the business. It's like, well, here's all the little things that we need to fix because I think they've got ripple effects. But then you're trying to juggle multiple competing priorities, right? Yeah. As opposed to ditch the emu line concept and only do your biggest rocks. You know, the whole Stephen Covey, like fill your jar with your big rocks first. Otherwise it's just shit falls out everywhere. Yeah. So you as the CEO, you could not actually get stuck in the detail. You should have people under you that can kind of understand your vision, translate it into execution. But what if, like in org dev is a perfect example, high-performing teams, culture work, in most organisations there is so much to be done.
Yeah.
You kind of do have to emu line.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of both, right? I think what people want to see is that there are big rocks being solved for.
Yep.
But at the same time, the 1%ers are being improved every single day. And so, and the reason this is so hard is, okay, well then immediately we're talking about a team. We're talking about org dev people. We're talking about change managers. We're talking about, significant investment.
Yeah.
And, but I think it has to be both because people want to see the long-term change happening. But they also just want to, and also I guess the other part of this is empowering people to make those 1% changes.
Yes.
If they see something they can do better,
Yep.
One of the things that we had at the Loomery when we first started the business, we had a series of principles, right? And one of the principles was like, if you see something broken, call it out, but don't stop there. Fix it.
Yep.
And I didn't get that right verbatim, but it was something like that. But the idea was like, look, we're going to try and empower as much as we possibly can. There will be some things that you can't fix or can't change because they're, they're big, they require investment, or we're dealing with them at an executive level, whatever it might be. But people are really keen to lean in and fix things, especially if you're building a high-performing environment.
Yeah.
If you're hiring the best and,
and especially if it moves some friction from their own day and their own work.
Yeah.
I'm amazed we haven't got through our first episode, that we have nearly got through our first episode without mentioning Cynefin, but let's just make sure that appears in a later episode. My last
I guess we can do links in the podcast episodes to frameworks and stuff. That'd be cool.
Well, I just think Cynefin going to appear in pretty much every episode,
right.
So stay tuned for Cynefin and what it is and where it comes from. We're nearly out of time, which I reckon I've said to you about 1,000 times, and then we've always gone over in every other thing we've ever recorded. But we're going to
now we have to.
Now we have to.
Yeah,
we're going to stick to time.
We're paying for this, mate.
I would like to know, because psych safety is going to be a topic that comes up all the time, right? And we can have a later episode on really truly defining it, because there's so many things that have the word psych in it: psychosocial safety, psychological health and safety, psychological safety. Being psychic, there's so many different things. So we'll talk about psych safety heaps, but one of the ways to build psych safety is in a vulnerable but not like completely unboundaried or unhinged way, right, is to talk about like your own humanity, right? Look at you starting to get anxious. Yes,
you can say
am.
fuck ups.
So it's important to talk about the shit shows, the stuff that's gone wrong, the stuff that hasn't worked.
Yeah.
So this is we'll see how we go, but this could be a segment on our little podcast. So what's a fuck up? What's a shit show? What's something that's just fallen off perch?
So it's funny you said psychic. So the thing that I was thinking about was something that I've learnt and seen and would call and put into the fuck up bucket is jumping to conclusions.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen this happen with my kids now, where I'll jump to a conclusion and assume something. And you have kids too, right? So they don't hide their emotions. And so the frustration that causes, because that's not what was happening or that's not what they meant or whatever it might be.
Yes.
Is this heightened reaction,
yes.
Of course. But actually I've noticed that I do the same thing at work.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm having to constantly hold myself and ask more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than kind of jumping to the answer or to the thing. So is this a single one? It's probably like a behavior that I've noticed. I know I've known it's there for a while, but with my kids,
it's so clearly
it's
tangible.
now like, oh yeah, shit.
Yeah.
Like this is causing a real reaction. And
the
so
people at work are probably containing,
totally.
but you're seeing the real version.
Yeah.
Well, I love a framework, so I've got a framework for you in an upcoming episode. Remind us to talk about SCARF.
SCARF?
Yes, remind us to talk about the ladder of inference.
I don't think I've heard of SCARF.
No, these are two new ones for you, I think. And remind me to talk, I think we've talked about this one before, type 1, type 2.
I will remind you, just listen back to the podcast.
There's no way you'll remind me.
Yeah, great.
There's no way.
So go on, what's yours?
My stuff, well, I was thinking about this before and you thought I was thinking so long because I didn't have any stuff ups, but it was the opposite. The laundry list is so long
list
that I don't even know where to start, but one that is just...
Is it an analogy?
Oh my God, we haven't had a single analogy in this podcast. This is crazy. So my one is fresh because I had a dream about it last night because I now keep dreaming about it. You know how your brain likes to do that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Sending an email to the wrong person or sending the wrong attachment. So I had a real doozy about 6 months ago with a client, sent an attachment that should not have been circulated to the people that I sent it to.
And in your line of profession, that could be quite...
catastrophic.
Yeah.
So thankfully, it was a client I'd been working with for many, many years and I owned it straight away. We talked to IT. We talked about, do we try and recall it? Do we do this? Do we do that?
Right.
I spoke directly to the CEO and he chuckled.
That's nice.
It was a phenomenal display of like, what, Mel? Everyone stuffs up. We'll be able to handle this. And he got on the front foot with me and we kind of tackled it together. Yeah.
So, but you still dream about it now?
I just dream about it in different contexts. Like I had a dream last night that it was a different, just an invite I've sent this week that would not matter if it went to the wrong person. And I've never sent something to the wrong person in the history of my life because, like you said, as just being a psychologist, you have to be, I mean, so many of us in our work, we have to be so careful. So I'm so careful. It was so out of character. So, yes, now it sits in my subconscious ready to come out at any given moment.
Do you think twice before hitting send now?
I check it so many times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it won't happen again. Well, I don't know.
Maybe.
We're all human, right?
Yeah. So we're done. Episode 1. In the can.
In the can.
See you next time.
We didn't kick the can down the road. The can is here.
See,
and we kept
I knew there was going to be a shitty way to use an analogy.
We kicked it around between us.
Here you are.
We didn't kick the can down the road. We kicked it between us.
All right.
And we got in the can.
Come on, let's close it off.
Thank you to anyone who's joined us, hopefully my clinical supervisor and the guy who said that there's low barrier to entry. Our first 2 listeners. Something that we would love our listeners to do, because you and I will be sometimes constrained in the data we can share, the case studies we can share out of respect for our clients and current workplaces. But we would love to hear from our listeners their curly, spicy, crunchy, difficult workplace business kind of questions.
Yeah, questions, thoughts, things they want us to dive into would be fun.
Yeah. Particularly the ones that, when we have guests on the podcast in time, they may also not be able to speak completely freely about some of these really complex, crunchy things. So we would love to hear from people about the tricky stuff they're facing, and we can dissect it with a bit of, distance. And we have an email address.
Do we?
Yes, it's a thing. It'll pop up somewhere below this. And we want people to hit like and subscribe. My 8-year-old will be really proud.
What's our email address?
That's something I just said. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's it. First episode of Great. Until next time.
See ya.
See ya.